Our show wouldn't exist without you listening. But if you want more information on how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or just to stay in touch, go to flippinthelid.com. We'll see you there. Welcome back, everybody, to Flippin' the Lid. You know what we do here now. We literally jump inside these stories of some of the most fascinating people who are creating impact in this world. And today, our guest is no exception. In fact, he's an individual that lived, in some cases, two different lives. He's faced severe physical trauma just like myself, but in completely different respects and completely different impacts in his life. But what I love more than anything about this man is that he's a husband and father first. And it doesn't matter what you say to him, that is absolute clarity on the singular greatest focus in his life. I've said for years that the only thing that's binary in my world is my wife and my kids. And this is an individual that exemplifies that just with his heart and the ways he shows up. But what's also really beautiful is that it's not just about what our stories are. It's about the faith, the conviction, the connection, and the passion to be able to continue to keep ourselves moving, even when it seems like we just can't even barely stand. And my friend, Joe, I am so happy to have you here.
Ryan, good to see you, man. Glad to be here. I'm excited for this conversation.
You know, I didn't really go into anything on what you do. I just talked about who you are in my eyes, but I always start most shows with this question because that's how I see you. Somebody who's breaking limitations, who's showing people what's possible, who's living life with depth and connection, right? Despite many reasons that maybe that wouldn't have been so easy for you. And I'd just love it if you could tell us who you are in your words, my friend.
Yeah, man. I mean, the opening there was beautiful until you said barely can stand, but like I can't stand. So
I know. I was trying to have a play on words there, and
Dude, it was so good. It's perfect. It's perfect.
That wasn't scripted. That just came out. But as soon as I said that, I was like, barely stand. I thought the same thing. I was like, shit, Joe can't stand at all.
Yeah. No, it was great. And I'm like, that's way too good not to say anything. I mean, come on now. That's just going to be awkward.
That's so good.
No, not. I use a lot of humor, as I feel like you do within the context of life. To answer your question, you're spot on. I think there's all kinds of different things to go after in this world. But at home, I want to be a hero in my house. I want to be famous in my house. And that is something that I continue to have to like pull myself back into. I get so excited about my endeavors outside of the home and being able to get to do what I do, but being a wife to April, a husband to my three kids, or a husband. Sorry, afternoon. A husband.
You're a wife sometimes to her as well. I'm sure it's okay.
Honestly, she's like, "Listen, I run this house." No, a husband to April. A husband to April, and a father to my kids. But yeah. So I mean, that's first and foremost. It's something that I continue to just go back to and making sure that I'm doing a good job there and dialing that in first and foremost.
It is so beautiful to hear you say that you want to be a hero in your own home and famous, right, to your family and in your own home. Help me understand what that means to you, because that it sounds incredible and there's depth that we clearly see at the surface on it. But what does that mean to you?
I think like there's not the glitz and glamour. There's not a red carpet being rolled out. There's nothing unique about it except for like showing up. I'm gone a lot. I'm gone almost 50% of the time right now. But when I'm home and even when I'm gone, whether it's FaceTime, whether it's devotions in the morning, whether it's just being able to have conversations with my kids and my wife is making sure I'm there. And now here's like the thing where it's real is there's a lot of mess ups. There's a lot of failures. There's a lot of need for grace and forgiveness. And so it's just real life. And I want to be an example of that to my kids as they're growing up, because I my mom and dad did a great job raising me and everything like that. But I think I guess my perspective of it is like, I really want them to understand what forgiveness looks like. I really want them to understand that like there's failure going to happen, because there's a lot of people I think right now that are carrying this giant bag of guilt and this giant bag of shame over their shoulders, and it's breaking them down and they don't know where. And so I want them to understand that it's okay to fail, because we all do.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot of tough lessons through failure that I would not take back, because they've been beautiful after the fact. But in those moments, I think it's just a beautiful piece to be able to share with your kids as they're growing up in the world that they're growing up in.
Yeah, I don't believe in failure either. I think failure only exists when you fail to find the feedback in the situation and be able to understand what it's pointing you towards. And, even listening to you talk as a dad, I appreciate the humility that you even start with. You're like, no, it's not all perfect. Like, as I'm seeking to be better every day, seeking to be a hero in my own home, like, I screw up and I make those mistakes, but you're also seeking repair when you create damage. You're also setting a model for what vulnerability and ownership can look like. And I know that for myself, my kids have been my greatest teachers in so many ways. And I was not the husband and father that I am today for the first 5 or 6 years of their life. I was a great husband and father. But to your point exactly, I was stuck in the blame and the shame and so many elements of the things that I didn't see that prevented me from showing up as the best version of myself. You can't talk about that and layer those pieces in without having personal experience and understanding what that looks like. So can you take us there in your marriage and in your household? And where are areas where you used to exist in shame and blame that you had to learn to shed layers and move through? Because, by the way, shame is the lowest frequency energy on Hawkins' scale. It's like 20 points of frequency when like courage is at like 200, right? Enlightenment's at like 700, right? And like all these other pieces start to change. So shame is deep and it's dark, but it doesn't get talked about. Where does shame impact you, and in those areas in particular?
Yeah. I love the fact that you say it doesn't get talked about, because it doesn't. It's hard. It's hard to own up to. It's hard, and especially in a masculine role as a father is, as a husband
feel, dude.
is.
Don't feel. You can't feel. You're gonna be weak.
Yeah. My goodness. And man, true masculinity is tapped into when you're actually feeling, when you're actually rolling through those emotions. And it's a great example that I always remember. It's only a couple years ago now, but my oldest son, Braxton, he's very much like me, super competitive little dude. He's 11 now, but this is probably when he's 8 or 9 years old, and super competitive guy. And so our personalities are very, very similar. He's sensitive, but wants to be really masculine and tuck those feelings. And that's something that I did a lot growing up. And there was a moment a couple years ago where I just lashed out at him, just absolutely said things out of my mouth that I shouldn't have said, and he went to his room crying. And it was just immediately that guilt and shame, just beating yourself up in your head. And in the moment, I'm kind of like, there's two sides of it. I want to go and rush and be like, dude, I am so sorry, blah, 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 and fix it. And then there's the other side of like, I'm the dad, and if I go there and say I'm sorry, then I lose the battle, and all like this pretty much this bullshit of guilt and shame telling you the narrative, which is not correct. And so wait a little bit and then go into his room, and in my head I'm thinking, this is the perfect time to teach this young boy about what forgiveness looks like. So I go in, start to talk to him a little bit, tears rolling down my cheeks, get emotional about it, but I'm just going, Brax, I'm sorry. What I said to you is wrong. I didn't mean those things. You are not those things. Here's where I'm at. Here's where my emotions are. And will you forgive me? And he's like, yeah, Dad, everything's cool, man. Whatever. But if I tell him these things at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 into his teenage years, I feel like he's going to get an understanding that we're going to mess up completely. But there's a moment.
I know he will, Joe.
Yeah.
That's I got goosebumps multiple times, because that's something that happened in my house far more frequently than I care to admit, is moments that created damage. And my wife and I have always believed, like, we're human and we're going to screw up. It's in the repair and ownership that the energy gets released, right? We genuinely believe, like, so much of the things that keep people stuck is because of the trash from their past, right? That moment of shame and blame that caused you to be triggered in anger and resentful and lash out at your son had nothing to do with your son. It had everything to do probably with how your dad looked at you when you were 7.
Right.
And so your ability to even talk about how you move that into your conscious awareness is just beautiful. And again, a great example of masculinity. I'm really curious, my friend. I'd like you to take us back to 2004.
Yeah.
And I want you to tell us where you were in your life, what was happening, how you were feeling, and what happened to you in that same year.
Yeah. So 2004, summer of 2004, kind of to set the stage, is in between my freshman and sophomore years of high school, freshman and sophomore years of college. I had went to Winona State University to play college football and came home to Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, which is about 2.5 hours down the Mississippi River, bordering Wisconsin and Iowa, is where my little hometown of 5,000 people were, Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. And going down, back down to train and to work as, any college student would. My buddies Kyle and Adam, best friends in high school, came back from college as well, different colleges. So we're all coming back and uniting in Prairie for the summer. And 19 years old and 6'6" and 260 pounds and rough, tough football player. Absolutely kind of living out my dream. I have no idea what I want to do in my life. I think I'd switched my major like twice already in 1 year, and no idea, but I knew I wanted to play football and was kind of living out that dream. Was always loved being a part of teams and whatnot. And so life was good. Pretty much felt like an invincible, big, rough, tough, tall football player. I was kind of living that charade, and in July, we're on the Mississippi River probably once a week, if not more, after jobs and whatnot. And in July 10th, 2004, we're out on the Mississippi River that summer day, beautiful summer day, 75 degrees, partly cloudy, enjoying the morning river. And we're always in back sloughs. Kyle's dad and grandpa had given him a little like 14-foot Alumacraft boat, but to us it could have been a yacht. Like, it was just so much freedom and fun as college dudes on the river. And
how bad it sounds like a good time.
So he's in the back slough, Adam's kneeboarding. I'm just sitting in the boat with my hands behind my head, enjoying the summer day, and Kyle's driving, and he ends up hitting the bottom of the river, and it sent me flying back. So the pull breaks on the chair of the boat sends me flying back, and I hit my head on the inside of the boat, in the front part of the boat, and that impact broke my neck at the C6 and 7 level, 6 and 7 vertebrae down from the base of your skull. So in a split second, go from that identity and that reality to I wake up and Kyle and Adam are looking over top of me with tears rolling down their face and frightening and freaking out. And I'm freaking out from the pain, not of the neck, but of the head injury where there's a gash in my skull. And I'm just screaming for them to just get me help. There's so much pain. I asked Adam to knock me out because of the pain. Like, it was just excruciating in those moments.
I deeply identify with portions of what you just described, obviously, in my own right. You wake up, you're in so much pain. How long after you woke up did you realize that you couldn't move your legs?
So I blacked out, woke up. Kyle and Adam are asking me questions. I'm excruciating pain, back and forth. They told me they were calling 911, and then they had asked me, like, they knew not to move my body. We were lifeguards growing up, so they knew to stabilize my neck and not move my body. But they were, can you move your legs at all? And sending the signal down from my brain down into my spinal cord, into my legs, subconsciously, like you do with any body part, and nothing happens. And so first I'm kind of going, oh, it's like a football stinger type of thing where, you go numb for a second. But then I touched my leg, and it was like I felt someone else's leg. It wasn't my leg that I was feeling, because it felt like I was touching my friend's leg or something. And so knew something was wrong, but I didn't know the gravity of the situation until like 2 or 3 days later. We had gotten to the shore from a rescue boat and then into the ambulance. The ambulance took me to the local hospital. Like, Adam's mom was right there as well. She was a nurse there for 43 years. And So she's there and they do these tests and whatnot. And they're like, we got to get you on the helicopter, get you to a bigger hospital. You have surgery. And a couple of days later, when I was a little bit more aware, is when the doctors are coming in and telling me the gravity of it, that I had a spinal cord injury, C6 and 7. I'm an incomplete quadriplegic, all these different things. And you're paralyzed. You're going to use a wheelchair. And I'm just like, what? It doesn't process.
Right.
You're 19 years old, life, like all the life in front of you, living out kind of your sport childhood dream, gone. And I'm just like, I didn't want to accept it. There's no way. Like, what? You're speechless. And, and from there, it was just this shock. And I remember just not wanting to believe it.
Yeah. I remember for the first, I don't know the exact timeline, right? Like 24, 48 hours ish. I remember feeling like I was in between worlds. Like what was happening in front of me was a dream, that it wasn't actually my reality. Does any of that resonate with you in your experience, regardless, outside of the lack of processing?
Yeah, I would say honestly, the entire hospital stay was just non-reality for me, and it was almost like this little, you're in this little prison, and you don't know what the outside world looks like. And I was in a power chair at the time, so I'm just moving this joystick around the campus. I went outside a couple times, but the most part stayed inside, and hated looking in the mirror. Didn't really want to go and see people. Didn't want to think about what the outside world looked like in a wheelchair. Didn't want to see myself in a wheelchair. Didn't want to identify as being a man in a wheelchair and what that meant. And like, what is, and dealing with any of those emotions or feelings. I literally stayed alive because of the people that would come into my hotel or hospital room. Felt like a little hotel room from a horror film, but in my hospital room, and was like almost on emotional life support, and kept on getting fed through these people that would show up. And what I thought was just like cliches of everything's going to be okay and you're going to get through it and we're praying for you and blah, blah, like it's just great. All right. Next day you wake up and the nightmare continues. And that was 89 straight days in that hospital room.
89 straight days, and you call it a hotel room, a hospital room, but it probably in a lot of ways also felt like a legitimate prison. Someone who's active, who's moving, who has a very vibrant life, who's 19, who's living life to the fullest, and then brought to an immediate halt, right? I find that one of the most normalizing things for the human experience is when our physical capability is challenged, and particularly in a significant way, right? Some people deal with this with just normal pain as they age. Others, it's with traumatic injuries to our bodies, like you and I have experienced. And I know that for me, it's interesting. I've had multiple physical situations that the physical piece knocked me into consciousness. Like I was not aware of things. I wasn't seeing things. I wasn't like together. And then my physical body's challenged in some way. And all of a sudden I have like perspective. I'm really curious for you. You said it so subtly and embedded, like it wasn't a big deal, but your complete identity and sense of self changed immediately in a moment.
Yeah.
And not only are you dealing with the physical pain and the healing and the disconnection and the isolation and all the pieces that are happening while all of this exists, but at the same time, like you're trying to figure out, is it real? How do I move forward? What am I doing? Right? At 19 years old, all of a sudden your entire world was 180 degrees in the opposite direction. Right?
Yeah.
How did you begin to move through that? Because a lot of people get stuck.
Oh man. First of all, there's in this story, and there's times where you kind of forget about some of this. To be honest, I mean, I've been on podcasts where I'm just like, oh yeah, I got in an accident, and then,
dude, I'm the same way.
Totally. Like it's like it's like the Disney movie, but like there's this dark period, and I was stuck in it for a solid probably 18 months after my accident, maybe a little bit longer, but like that's when I started to kind of move out of it. But there's a dark period. Like my reality is I'm no longer playing football. That identity is completely ripped away. Everything that I built my life to be as an athlete is 100% gone. And the cruel part of it is, and I remember that summer still in the hospital room, is life's going on. So those friends that were in college and have to go back to college. It was July 10th. So a month, 2 months later, they're heading back to school, and I'm literally paralyzed in my room. So like life's moving on, and I'm just laying there, and like the cruelness of that, and then the realness of it was both horrible for me, but also kind of sparked something in me that said like life is going on with or without you. Like the train doesn't stop. And it could have been there, man, there's so many people that see that and go, I don't want to get on.
Yeah.
And that's, oh man, it's so sad. And I've been there. There's times in that hospital room where I'm like, I don't want to jump on that train. I have no idea what that's going to look like. I don't want to do it. What is that going to, who am I without sports? Who am I as a man with a disability? But life moves on, and regardless, life's going to move on in your sad existence, or it's going to move on and you can choose to make something beautiful out of it.
Yeah.
But I was in that dark moment for 18 months. I ate my feelings. I got really fat, and didn't want to be around people in wheelchairs. Didn't want to be identified as a person in a wheelchair. So I stayed in my house a lot. I was back home with my parents. Every 19-year-old kid's dream. Moved back in with mom and dad. So like, there's a lot of things. You know, my mom was taking care of me. I wasn't independent whatsoever. Helping me, intermittent cath, helping me go to the bath, like all everyday activities, ADLs that you just take for advantage, taking a dump and going to the bathroom. It isn't happening by myself. My mom's doing it at 19. And so talk about like going from a masculine football player to your mom wiping your ass. Like there's a lot of, there's a lot of dark moments in that.
Yeah. I'm grateful that you went there and that you shared some of those dark moments with as much clarity as you did, even with the imagery, the words, and where you were at in those moments. Because, you know, again, I deeply, deeply identify with a lot of that from the second part of my story when I was 20. And we won't go there for the purpose of this, because today is about you. But it's fascinating because I realized how disconnected I was in so many ways because of all the areas that I tried to protect myself. And what I was blind to was the level of shame that I was carrying and the level of anger that was really hidden underneath. And what's interesting is, for me, most of my anger, regardless of the generational patterns and pieces of where it can exist in my world, most of my anger came in direct response to my relationship with my body. And so you talk about the dark period, right? You're grieving the loss of the life that you would have known, right, on this path. You're already in a place where you're living your so-called dream life, right? And now all of a sudden your mom's wiping your ass. What I'm curious about is, you moved through that, and that's great. How long did the emotional impact of this injury show up and affect you in the patterns in your life?
It's let's be real. It's still a trigger. It still can pop up from time to time, and it pops up in insecurity, and it pops up in a feeling of inadequacy. You know, as a father with a disability, and going like, am I good enough? Are they going to see me as masculine enough? Can I do this in other ways that aren't kind of provided for me? And you know, realizing how powerful my mouth can be, even though I physically can't do some things with my kids. And so like, that's something that I still struggle with. It still pops up. It still needs to be worked on. It's something that I truly don't think goes away. Like, our triggers don't necessarily go away. Our ability to battle them.
You just spend less time in them.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's the real honest answer.
Yeah. You went on to do a lot of really big things, and you're doing big things right now from a physical perspective, right? You've been able to channel your athleticism, your focus, your leadership, so many of the ways that you show up in the world. And, you're a 2-time Paralympic medalist in wheelchair rugby. That was something that just drew me to you. And when you and I first met, I don't even think you were coaching yet, but you were in the process of potentially moving into a leadership role. Talk to us a little bit about your journey from realizing now that you're going to spend your entire life in a wheelchair to becoming a 2-time Paralympic medalist in wheelchair rugby, right? Like, what's the journey that got you there, and how did you get connected to that sport?
Yeah. I started out eating Wheaties, and then it's
By the way, you belong on a Wheaties box if you haven't made it there yet. Like,
right, exactly. Come on, Wheaties.
Come on, Wheaties. We're gonna put in a plug right now. We're gonna send this little clip to Wheaties. You're gonna be on the cover of Wheaties, bro.
Give me some love.
Get on the box.
Yeah. What do you mean you don't eat breakfast? No. It's yeah. No, it's a long process, but first of all, it was finding out that my identity didn't need to be. So I'm a lifelong sports guy, and I love sports. I love what they teach. I love team sports, everything like that. It's rooted in me for a reason. But I realized like my only identity isn't in sports. My only identity isn't in being an athlete, and that really helped kind of navigate and give me kind of the grace and space to be able to kind of continue on and figure out what life was like. So that first step was in the hospital was realizing, let's get in the wheelchair and figure out some stuff so I can go home. And then when I went home, I'm like, oof, 19 years old, this is great. My mom's helping me out. I love this, but let's go back to college. So that was the next step. And then people around me, the support around me, continuing to kind of push me. There's times where I didn't want to go back to school or go out and hang out or anything like that. But people around me going, let's get you out, dude. Let's get you back in the community. And so continuing to like feel a little bit more comfortable with that, as long as people weren't patting me on the head when I went out, or asking me to, all this, the 90-year-old ladies like, you need a push. I'm like, I feel like you should sit on my lap and I should give you a ride. Like this is backwards. Yeah. But no, it led me to go back to school, which led me to figure out that I had a competitive fire in me. So I helped out the football team a little bit. I was like, I want to do something. I want to go somewhere and do this. And that's where I started looking up wheelchair rugby stuff. And it was around that time as well where Kyle, who was driving the boat, one of my best friends in life, was like, bro, you need to get yourself weighed. And he was super kind about it and super loving about it. But he's like, you're fat, man. You're not healthy right now. And I didn't believe him. I was like, no, man, like I didn't have a wheelchair scale at home or anything like that. Like still don't. But I like, how do you get weighed? So you go to the hospital, you jump on a bed, and before you jump on the bed, it's zeroed out. And you jump on the bed, they weigh you. And it weighed me in at like 285 pounds. And I was like, whoa.
Well, that big 6'6" frame gets big too.
Yeah, it's real big, especially with all those emotions. And he was like, man, you should probably start like doing something, working out or like pushing around the block. Or I couldn't push my wheelchair, my manual wheelchair. I'd switched over to that after a little while, and couldn't push it around the block, or like maybe 2 blocks. Like it just didn't have the strength to do it. And but him showing me enough tough love to help me get weighed and kind of make me realize, hey, you're heading down a path where it's not great. And then going back to school and realizing I still had a competitive fire led me to looking up some sports online, found wheelchair rugby, and completely changed my life getting into that environment in 2006.
Yeah. So 2 years after the accident, you landed into that environment relatively quickly, which is beautiful. And I also really love the camaraderie, friendship, and depth you just shared with your friend, right? So often we need someone outside of ourselves to tell us when we are not congruent with who we believe we are or not living up to our power and potential. And I know that some of the greatest moments of transformation and shift in my life came from when people in my life who were close to me said something similar, like, hey, you're not on the right path. You're not doing well. Like, How are you going to get yourself back? And so I really appreciate you honoring your friend even in that. And something that comes to mind for a lot of people is I think it's easy to sit here and say it's an accident, right? And it was an accident when it all happened. But what I also really appreciate is the same man who was driving the boat is also the same man who saved your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because had he not shown you a very accurate reflection of yourself in that time, you wouldn't be who you are today, and you wouldn't be on the path because someone would have lacked the courage to reflect it back to you.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good.
So that's really beautiful. And I just really wanted to honor that because like you have clearly zero mal energy, negative energy, response, resentment, or anything towards this man. And in so many ways, it's also because he never left you. And in fact, he's the one that also saved you.
Yeah.
And so it's beautiful how you said that. Thank you for sharing. At some point while you were talking to the Red Bull team, you talk about your first view of murder ball is wheelchair rugby. Is that you may be the only person I can think of that can use the phrase cripple running around to make each other more crippled and get away with it, right? Like, give me your take on the word crippled, because that word has a different meaning to both of us, I'm sure, in different ways. Yeah. And I'd love to hear what that word means to you and how you've lived into it.
So obviously not PC whatsoever. But when I use it to make people feel comfortable. And like, I hate the word handicap. Handicap. Like, it's gross. And then like disabled, I'm okay with it. It's just kind of like, I don't know, indifferent, but probably a little bit more on the And then crippled is just kind of like, my body has done a lot for me, but it's just like physically, like, this is kind of where it is. Like I am paralyzed. And I can do a lot of things, but it's still a crippled body. Like it is what it is. And so just kind of calling that out in a way where we're not dancing around it. And I think when I speak, it allows the person that's listening into the space in a comfortable, safe way. That's the main reason for using it. But I just like it better than some of these other words out here.
Well, and honestly, I hadn't even compared that to the words that you just used, like disabled and right. Like, and in all reality, I completely identify, right? Like when someone tells me, they're like, "Oh, how is it to be handicapped?" And I'm like, I'm not handicapped. They're like, how does it feel to be disabled? I'm like, I'm not disabled. Like one arm is different. I don't have full use of it. Yeah. I've got a whole bunch of different problems that come from that. I've got ancillary body pain for 30 minutes, but I'm not disabled, right? Crippled is actually probably the most accurate description of it is. And I think for me, I actually have a little bit of a sentimental term to that because my grandma had polio back in the day. And she was someone that I could relate to from a physical perspective because she used to make custom braces to keep her foot up so she wouldn't trip when she walked. And one of her legs was really, really small. And crippled was what the term was that she used and we used. And it just never meant that we couldn't do anything. It just meant that our body had been through some trauma and was a little different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right. Good. It is inviting and it's normalizing. And I really appreciate that. You 13 years on the team, 8 years as captain, and now you're the coach.
Yeah.
You were an observer and a learner, a participant, a leader, and now you're leading at a whole different level. So talk about how your identity was created to who you are today and how rugby helps complement that identity, because I know it's not your identity.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been some times in those moments in the 15 years working with the national team on different levels. And then 17 years in rugby. There's definitely been times where rugby has been my absolute kind of identity dive in, and I got to pull myself back out. So like that's set at the top. But I think what's happened in the span of the last 15 years is I've learned that it is a conduit if I choose it to be, but it can be a vehicle which drives me further towards my purpose. And what I've been able to experience with men and women in the program is a perfect little vehicle and conduit to help others. Because that's what I feel like I was put on this earth to do, is just help others through, whether it's speaking, coaching, being an athlete, whatnot. Getting to do it at a competitive, high elite level is the cherry on top. And so that's what's helped. It's just been a great vehicle to go how far my body can go, how far mentally I can go, It's taken me all over the world, but it's shown me some really tough lessons that it's not the end all, that it's not about the medals, but it's about those friendships that I've developed. It's about the mentorship and mentoring that I've received throughout the years. And then now as a coach is how do I help men and women in our program become better while they're in recruitment through retirement so they can go out and do their true purpose. That finding, it's a passion. Rugby is a passion, definitely not a purpose, but it can drive you towards that intersect.
That's beautiful. I love how you talk about that. What's one trait that you believe makes you a winning coach?
Competitive, culture. I think. Well, let's stop right there. Culture. I think culture is so stinking important. And I'm learning year 2. I'm learning how big culture is, and then keeping people accountable within that culture is.
Yeah.
It can lead to some really, really hard decisions on who stays and who goes. And some people leave on their own, I think, because the culture there is like, hey, we are going to be accountable. We're going to be vulnerable with each other. We're going to be accountable with each other, but it's also a performing elite space. And so like you need to make sure that, then if you're a non-performer, that you have really good culture and that you're dialed in there. If you're a performer, you better have really good culture. And so not having two different standards for those two different groups where you have your starters and your role players is across the board. We're going to meet the standard of culture. And if we don't, it's my job to keep you accountable. And so learning there a little bit. And then number 2, within the competitive balance, we want to win 100%. But before we get to winning, is creating a space to be able to fail. So just like I want to teach my kids about failure and forgiveness, I want to teach the athletes about failure and forgiveness, and that creating that space. It's something I'm growing in and learning about, and what that safe place is and where it isn't. And so that's where I'm at.
What's something you still need to forgive yourself with?
I think it's something that I constantly am preaching about across the board, speaking, coaching, or with the family, is forgiveness. I think I'm really, really hard on myself, which can lead to some success, but it also can lead to a lot of baggage. And so letting those failures go, forgiving myself, realizing that I'm not going to get it right all the time. I put a lot of pressure on myself due to, the non-existent relationship with my father growing up. And I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there for my wife. I want to be there for my, used to be teammates and now team and athletes and staff. And there's times where like I get it wrong. There's times where I lose my self-care routines and it starts to deteriorate my body really quickly. And I fail. And so forgiving myself is a big one that I can continue to grow on.
I resonate with that. I'm fast to forgive others, and it's a learned process to forgive myself. And, there's a whole variety of places that's the case. You got a lot of emotion when you first started answering that question. And it took you to those moments around some of the failures that exist. And so I'm going to challenge you to go a little bit deeper and be specific. What is one failure that you're specifically struggling to forgive yourself with, and why?
Oof. A big one is 2016. It was around rugby. It was context is 2012. We lose bronze medal game. We win the bronze medal game. We lose the semifinal to go to the gold medal game. We had been ranked number 1 from 2005 to 2012. Epic failure, epic loss, huge upset. Canada beats us in the semifinal. And from that next quad on, so 13 through 16 is like tunnel vision on gold. Like that's all that mattered. We can win gold. I became a captain in 13, a young captain, 2013. 28 years old, and was just like, hey, like if we win, I'm a really good leader. That's going to bode well. If we win, aspirations to be a speaker leader, but I'd be a better speaker with gold medal on my resume. All this, like better husband, better like everything's in line. Let's win the gold. And that's like the golden ticket to cash in on affirmation for what this career is. And I think I even drilled down deeper. It was affirmation on being okay with being paralyzed, being okay with being in this wheelchair. Like that's how deep it had went. And 2016 ended up being cut from the squad like 2 months before the Rio Paralympics. And I was so pissed off. And for a long time, and I think still rooted in me a little bit, is this unwillingness to forgive the decision that was made, and rooted into kind of like this idea of like, you're not gonna put those walls up. Don't trust, dude, because they're gonna come crumbling down type of a situation. There was a flip in 2017 where I learned, and again, like it was just like pointing the finger, totally playing the blame game on this whole thing. Not my fault. I don't want to do anything with it. I don't need to pick any pieces up. Like, no way. And what I realized is my identity had just been tied to rugby and ripped away. And it was like a parallelism to my accident in 2004. It had been tied to sports, ripped away. Who am I now? And I realized like this sport can be taken away at any time. I could have, been cut or retired at any time. What am I without it? Who am I without it? What's my faith mean without it? And from there, like picking those pieces up, and I still think 6-7 years later, I'm still working on that. And understanding how to trust, understanding how to not blame, and understand how to forgive in that moment. But it took an entire year after that to start to work on myself and go, dude, you weren't a good leader. You weren't bad, but you weren't good. You weren't working on what you needed to work on. Winning was above everything. And then realizing like the men and women and growing in relationship with them was way more important. Then understanding that I needed to be at home and present, even when I was on the road, be present in my house, and understanding that. And so it was a huge moment, a huge pivot in my life, huge pivot in our personal life at home. But something that, it took a long time to take that chapter off the shelf and start to talk about, but there's still some anger and some resentment that still bubbles up a little bit that I'm still dealing with.
Well, thank you for sharing that so openly. What's interesting, my friend, is even hearing you reflect and talk, your own definition of what forgiveness is and the lack of failures that actually exist in our life is perfectly modeled in what you learned and extracted in the feedback that you got from that situation. It changed you. You became something more. You became someone more. You allowed yourself to recognize where your identity was flawed and where you weren't showing up as a leader, and you closed that gap. And so for that, I just want to reflect back to you, my friend. I hope that you find a way to release that energy soon. If there's anything I can do to personally help you do that, I'm happy to, because you deserve to not carry the weight around for those things. And it's very obvious how intentional and aware you are in showing up for others. And so the other question that I have for you around that is, why is it that you believe that you need to carry so much weight for other people?
Oof. I don't know. I don't know, man. I was just talking to my wife about that this week. Interesting timing.
There's never coincidental timing in my world.
Yeah.
It's just, it always happens.
Yeah, where I need to feel on at all times. Yeah. And very hard on myself and going like, I need to feel on in my marriage, with my kids, in my leadership role with work, with getting the next speaking gig, with, it's every single minute of the day. And it's something that is really, really hard for me, is to like turn that off, and it's yeah.
I resonate deeply with a lot of that. My doing self way outweighed my being self for a lot of years. And, it's interesting because here's what I'll also reflect back to you on this. As it relates to you recognizing that the greatest investment you can make is in yourself and in your family, right? And when you pour into your family, everything else in your life grows. What's also really interesting about this piece is that it's really no different, right? Like, you have the ability to recognize like where and how you've moved. But what I've realized is the more I can be, the more I am.
Yeah.
And so what I realized as well, and I'll just say this for my own, I'm not saying this is the case for you. It was a lot easier for me to just stay busy and stay distracted than it was for me to actually deal with the pain that I still hadn't dealt with in here to allow myself to be free and move. And for me, I'll just share this with you because it's unique and interesting. I, over the last 30 years, have had physical pain every day that I can remember.
Yeah.
The last 2.5 weeks, as a byproduct of a lot of growth, evolution, and relaxing and creating congruence and eliminating anger and all these pieces that I even hear and see you in front of me dealing with, I haven't had any physical pain in 2.5 weeks. Wow. As I've had more emotional connection and depth and understanding in myself than I've ever had in my entire life. Now, that said, I'm not saying that that'll be the case for you in every place, but what I also found is the greatest source of resistance in my life in any capacity, largely of which was showing up in the shame and the blame and the lack of ability to be, all came from what was in here that I wasn't giving myself the space to process.
Yeah.
So I throw that out there just to say, my friend, I'm here in any place possible, but that's something I want to challenge you on, is that I actually do believe that you can create a hell of a lot more freedom there for yourself if you can find a way to change up the rhythm a little bit.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's not to suggest you're doing anything wrong, because every single thing up until this moment has shaped you into who you are and the perspective that you have in Glean.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why you are a high performer, and that's why you are a leader, and that's why you are a connector. What I'm really curious about, because I know that this is the most important person in your world, talk about your wife, where she came into your life, what she has meant to you, and who she is to you today.
Yeah. So April and I met in high school and started dating like a month after.
Yeah, so pre-injury, right?
Yeah, pre-injury, about a month before high school was done, and then dated through college that first year, and then was in my accident. And so she was in my hospital room every single day, 89 straight days, and never left my side since. And we've been through everything that I've kind of gone through. She's gone through.
She's been there,
and she's a helper in every sense of the word, with all the respect that word has. I think helper sometimes has a negative connotation, but helper in the most powerful way possible. And she's also there to guide me as like a beautiful human guardrail, lifting me up when I need it, pulling me back when I need it, like super hard on me when I need it. And for that, like it's been a beautiful, beautiful journey with her. And like it's just, I see her, the way that she treats our kids, the way that her heart is with our kids, the way that she wants people to feel a certain way and is really good at it, has been a beautiful thing and a beautiful journey to be on.
Who do you think you'd be if she wasn't in your life?
I don't even want to imagine. Enough
said. That's the perfect answer. That's beautiful, my friend. You are speaking on stages all over the world. You are really elevating and empowering people, even beyond what you're doing, by just a living example as who you are and the leadership that you possess through rugby. What are the messages that you care most about people hearing? And what are your greatest challenges in getting those delivered into the world?
Yeah, I think there's probably 3 of them that are tied into one concept, but Number one is wrestling with people's identity. Something that I've used lately is this acronym SELF, support, effort, love, and faith. So the support that you have around you, looking at that when you're looking in the mirror, the concept is you're looking in the mirror, and that can be really ugly at times, really hard at times. Like we've all gone through that and looked in the mirror and don't like what we see, whether it's physical or mental or spiritual or whatever it is. But looking at the support around you, a lot of times we feel isolated and lonely, but there's people in our lives that are there for us, that are specifically there for a specific reason. We can also look at our effort when we're looking in the mirror and looking at how far we've came. That's something that's been super important for me when I'm having bad days, when I'm going through dark moments, is to look in the mirror and find.
Hold on. One second.
Yeah. There.
I think I'm back. Uh-oh. Hold on. Sorry, the audio went out for me. 1 second. It's not on your side, it's on mine.
Okay.
Can you hand me the phone there? Sorry, Joe. This is the first time this has happened, brother.
Oh, no problem.
All right, now let me get this reconnected to the computer. There we are. Perfect, I think. Hold on. I'm right. Can you talk?
Yep. Check.
We're back. We're back.
Awesome.
We're back. Thank you for the pause.
Okay.
Do you remember where we were?
All right, so we were talking about, so self.
Effort.
So self.
I think you were on self. So
yeah.
Pick back up at E.
Yeah, so effort, and looking in there and then having the perspective of like how far you've worked, how far you've came. I think that's something that's been really important for me, and kind of like the baseline has always been the 19-year-old kid in the hospital bed, laying there paralyzed, not wanting to get in the wheelchair. And like, what does he think about of how far I've came? Like, he'd be impressed by getting a pair of pants on, literally. But like understanding how much bigger it's gotten since then, or how much better it's gotten since then. And so like the effort there, and then love. I know like that word's kind of thrown around a lot and whatnot, but for me, it looks like the love that you have for yourself, understanding how to love yourself, understanding how to love your body, understanding how to love the people that are loving you in that support group, and then loving your effort, understanding that you are putting in good work, that you are enough, that you are adequate, that you are secure enough to move on. And then faith, that's different for everyone. But for me, there's a faith in God, but there's also a faith in the support that's there, the faith in the effort that's been put in, the faith that there is love there and loving yourself. And so that self piece with identity. And then the other piece is it's circled around being a fighter. It's circled around learning how to get back up from the circumstances or obstacles that knock you down constantly, right? And then it's something that our team is it's something that our team culture is focused around, is we are going to be fighters. And it's something that I'm focused around. It's my personality. I want to be a fighter. And really I like it, and it's rooted in the idea that you're going to get knocked down in life. You're going to have circumstances that suck. You're going to have and they can be in your control, that you messed up and you totally screwed yourself up and whatever it is, or it can be something that's outside of your control.
Right.
And either way, there's this personal responsibility that has to happen. It has to be activated for anything to happen. And the first part is just getting up. Like, how are you going to react? How are you going to respond? And really, it's just I love to talk to people about that. I love for people to be like, hey, let's hear how you've been beat up, abused, whatever it is. You still get a choice. And a lot of people have been beaten up so far down to the ground that they don't realize that they still have a choice.
That's right.
And so it's getting back up, that fighter mentality that I'm just hope and pray and wish people would understand. Like, you've got an out here. You've got an out here. I always tell people the blame game is pointing the fingers and not thinking that you have anything is the paralysis. It paralyzes you because you give them all of the chips. But then when you go, I can get back up. literally I can just get in my wheelchair and all of a sudden I got mobility. And that's like the physical metaphor for I just hope and pray people realize.
But, I'm going to use a very simple example to even what you just said, right? Because in your case, it's not ever being able to walk again. And my wheelchair is my option. And I could have an electric one. I could have a push one. I could figure out other ways of mobility, but that's going to be the most practical. But movement is so critical and key in life. Like, we have to remain in movement. Just this last weekend, we were playing with our kid, or I was out with my kids on Friday. We were on one of those they were on one of those rocky things on the playground with a big old spring in the middle, 4 seats on each side, and kids in the middle that were rocking with it. My daughter decided she was going to get up in the middle of it. Ankle and foot crushed underneath the bar. Like, excruciating pain, witnessed it. She hasn't walked in 4 or 5 days, right? Thank God nothing is broken. Like, she's going to be just fine. And I knew that in day one, and it was okay. But we were trying to figure out, like, we didn't have kid crutches. We didn't have a kid wheelchair. We didn't, right? Like, and she couldn't walk. So my wife and I are carrying her around for a couple of days. Lack of independence, dependency, right? Inability to move. And my grandma has Alzheimer's. And so my parents take care of her. And she's got this really cool little walker that's got this sling in the middle. And I was like, that would be perfect because she could put her knee up in it. And we only need it for like maybe a week while she's doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was already getting doom and gloom when she couldn't move. In 5 minutes, when she was able to get on wheels and had movement, her natural light turned back on. And I know that for myself, those were the periods that I got darkest, was when I didn't move. And I'm not talking about the do versus be thing here. I'm talking about being stuck in the state of life and not being able to move one day over another, one moment over another, one breath over another to try to improve my quality of life and state of being.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you've done that always and consistently and had these moments where movement really saved you. I'm fascinated to understand your struggle with integration over balance. I love the descriptor. I describe it that way as well because I don't believe in balance, but I'd love to hear your struggle and how you define integration and balance in your life.
Yeah, balance for me has always been kind of like, that's where the guilt comes back in. You need to balance your life out. And most men's brains, studies, it's more like you can compartmentalize and whatnot, and women are more spaghetti, whatever. I'm spaghetti, man. I'm like straight up spaghetti that just I don't compartmentalize well. I know that. And balance wise, there's just, I think about when I'm with my kids, there's times where I'm thinking about rugby. When I'm with rugby group, I'm thinking about my kids. When I'm not speaking, I'm thinking about all the above. And like, there's just so many different thoughts and stuff going on, but I know like, hey, I want to have a good, healthy balance per se. But for me, it's not balance. It's integrating. So like, last week at tryouts, in my schedule was, 5 a.m, I'm getting up, I'm reading and doing my devotion. At 5:30, I'm working out. At 7:30, I'm FaceTiming and talking to the kids, and we're doing a family devotion. And so it's integrated into my rugby schedule when I'm gone. It's integrated at home, obviously, in a lot easier way than it is on the road. But like my life can't compartmentalize. I can't just be a part-time dad. It needs to be full-time, and I need to be present even when I'm gone physically. And so that's something that is a process. But I know I'm a lot healthier. I have a lot better self-care. I have a lot better attitude towards going out and conquering the day when those things happen. And for me, it's the morning that makes the most sense. And so that's something that I hope to continue to grow into just an absolute where that's a non-negotiable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're already on the flow because you're aware of it. You're intentional and you're making movement. Where's the team going to end this year? How are you guys going to do? What's the culture going to look like? How are you going to craft their ability to connect?
Yeah. So we've got 8 new players from 2022 to 2023, 8 out of 16. So half the
16.
team is
Thank
new.
you for saying that. I was just going to say, for those who don't know, how many are on? Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Half the team.
Half the team's new through some retired players and then cutting some players and getting some new players in. So it's going to be a brand new team dynamic, but continuing to build in that culture. We have some really strong leaders. We finished number 2 World Championships in 2022, which is another major tournament besides the Paralympics. And so like we're kind of forward thinking on Paris, which is August of 2024. But this year is all about building that, creating accountability and building that out. And so we can have a strong 2024. This year is all about qualifying for Paris, which will be in Santiago in November. And yeah, just there's a couple tournaments before that are great spots to be able to allow the team to fail and to learn and grow. But we're pretty darn excited about that. So I mean, the big thing there is creating that accountability, building out those relationships so we can hit the runway in January 2024 and hopefully finish on the podium.
I love it. All right, I'm gonna bring one more serious question at you, and then we're gonna lighten and start to wrap here.
Cool.
Your kids, what is one thing they wish they could remove from you as their dad? And what is their favorite thing with you as their dad?
Oh man. Favorite thing. Let's go with favorite first. Yeah, I think just the interaction, being able to just get out. I don't let my wheelchair kind of define whether I'm going to do or not do something. And so, there's never too many times where they're going, yeah, I can't do that. He's in a wheelchair type of a deal.
Love it.
It's go out and do it and figure it out. And so like, that's something that we have a lot of fun with. And then one thing that they could wish that they could take away, I think it's deep. I think it's interesting. My kids will still be like, Dad, I wish you could walk.
Yeah.
And I think for them, it's just where they're at in their emotional stage of development makes complete sense. And so continuing to like share with them that, life goes on in a wheelchair. It's okay that I'm in a wheelchair. The wheelchair has brought me a lot of joy and a lot of success and a lot of experience. I think that's probably where they would say
just because they want what's best for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That resonates with me as well. Both my kids have made comments about like, oh man, I wish your arm didn't ever get hurt, or you didn't have a little arm or whatever. And it's never from any place of, it's always just like they can't envision what it's actually like, even though they've lived with me their entire life and they know what's possible. And they still just want everything for us to be safe, protected, and normalized. Yeah. And, I know at least in my own case, though there have been moments in my life that I wish that I could have taken the accident back, it's been a long time since I've had a thought like that cross my mind. And in fact, most people who've asked me recently, like, would you change it? I wouldn't change a damn thing. Yeah. I'm curious your opinion on that.
No,
same thing.
I mean, it's kind of like when you ask like, what would life be like without April? And the same thing, like, what would life be like if I didn't have that accident? And like, this has been a beautiful, beautiful life. And I'm coming up on the mirrored life of 19 and 19 this summer, and reflecting a lot on it and like what's happened in the last 19 years and the seeds I've been able to plant around the world has been pretty neat, pretty honoring to do. And and to do it all through this made up sport where you just smash into each other is kind of crazy, man. Like, it's been a really cool ride and wouldn't take it back. It's maybe it's comfort in the knowing and what my life has been like, but I mean, it's been pretty awesome.
What's funny is I don't even want to know what it would be like. Like, that's the cool part. And it's like, there's a part of me that wonders, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. Like, this is where I am. This is my existence. This is how I show up in the world. And it's beautiful. And by the way, man, it is a privilege. It's a privilege to know you. It's a privilege to have you in my life. It's a privilege to watch you plant those seeds, because you don't just plant them. You also water them. You nourish them, and you make sure that those plants have the chance to grow into whatever they're capable of being, because you're setting a solid root system. Like, that's how you live your life with people. And it's obvious the way you lead with heart, the way you show up, and the way you're willing to be open in a lot of the things that a lot of people don't talk about or want to spend even any minutes and moments in. And so I'm really grateful for that. I'm curious if you've got a closing thought that you'd like to leave everybody with. And certainly I want to make sure that you can let everyone know how they can get a hold of you, because I want anyone who can find a way to support you, what you're doing, or learn from you in all of the greatness and wisdom that you have to offer. I want them to find you. We'll put everything in the show notes, but please, closing thought, and let us know how we can find you, brother.
Yeah, it's let's close with this, that, like every single person that's a human probably has something in their life that they've dealt with through, whether it's divorce, disability, disease, depression, something that has truly crippled them, that they have some wheelchair in their life. And in my challenge to you is that you've got a choice in it. You've got a responsibility in it to get back up. And not that you're just going to throw it away, not that it's going to go away. I think you and I are unique where people can visibly see that it doesn't go away. But at the same time, you get a choice in it. Like it's your choice. It's your life. It's your mirror you're looking into. You get the choice, and there's a lot of power in that. And you can take back your power by saying, yes, I'm going to get back up, and just challenge any listener. Take a look at that. Take a look at a true look in the mirror. And you're going to find that you're going to have some power, and that you're going to have some responsibility, and that life is pretty awesome on the other side.
Thank you for looking in the mirror every day, my friend. Thank you for getting back up and moving every single day. And thank you so much for being here with us today, my friend.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you, Brian.
All right, everybody. Well, you just heard it from the man himself. It doesn't matter if you get knocked down and literally can't physically stand back up, you can keep moving. And whether you're 19 and living the high life, or you turn around 2 weeks later and your mom's helping wipe your butt, it's life. It's reality, and your identity can change, but how are you staying connected to yourself? Who in your life is actually reflecting that accurate mirror back to you so that you can see when you're out of alignment of your power, your potential, and who you're capable of being? If you focus on connection and culture and vulnerability, you can build a tribe of community around you so that you can leverage your best self and tap into the full acronym that Joe just taught us today. But what it's going to require you to do is to be honest with yourself, look inside, and visit those dark moments long enough until you find the light. Because it's those lessons that you extract from the situations that happen to all of us that become most meaningful in how you live your life next. Continue flipping open your lid and scan your can. What you can probably tell by now is that I love telling these stories, but what I love even more is the impact that's coming from them. You see, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible. But to do that, we need you. See, we believe that moved people move people. And so all I'm asking is, if you've resonated, connected with any of the messaging, please consider commenting, sharing, leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for tuning into Flipping the Lid. And if you want more information on the show, how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or any of the other details, head over to flippingthelid.com. We'll see you there.